Some cities happen to have a river. Lisbon depends on one. The Tagus River is not just a nice background for tourists taking sunset photos. It defines Lisbon's transportation, economy, climate, urban form, and even the way the city feels. Without the Tagus, Lisbon would be a completely different place, probably flatter too. And honestly, Lisbon without hills would confuse everyone. Local residents would start walking normally, and tourists would no longer need emergency brakes every 200 meters. Today we explore how the Tagus shaped Lisbon and why the relationship between cities and nature still matters more than many urban planners once believed. This video is the episode 6 of the first module of the course for Urban Planning and Environment. The module is named When Cities and Nature Collide. Follow the course if you like the topic.
I'm Hushmar Nasoni. It's Urban History.
The Tagus is the longest river on the Iberian Peninsula. It begins in Spain and flows westward until it reaches the Atlantic Ocean in Lisbon. But near Lisbon, something interesting happens. The river suddenly widens into a massive estuary. In some places, it feels like an inland sea than a river. This enormous body of water created one of the best natural harbors in Europe, and that changed everything. For centuries, Lisbon became wealthy because of its location on the Tagus. During the Age of Exploration, ships departed from here toward Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Spices, silk, gold, and enormous wealth passed through Lisbon's port. Of course, so did conquest, colonialism, and slavery. Urban history is rarely simple, but geographically, Lisbon is perfectly positioned. The city connected inland Iberia to the Atlantic world. The river became Portugal's gateway to global trade. And naturally, cities tend to grow where money flows, literally. But rivers don't just create opportunities, they also create obstacles. For most of Lisbon's history, crossing the Tagus was difficult. The estuary was simply too wide for traditional bridges. So, for centuries, ferries became the city's main connection across the river. And ferries worked reasonably well, until modern urban growth arrived. As Lisbon expanded during the 20th century, more people began living on the southern side of the Tagus, while working in the city center. Suddenly, transportation demand exploded. The city needed a permanent crossing. And in 1966, Lisbon finally got one, the 25 de Abril Bridge. If it looks familiar, it's because it looks remarkably similar to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It is basically the Europe's version of "Can I copy your homework?" The bridge transformed metropolitan Lisbon. Suburbs expanded rapidly across the southern bank, commuting increased, and urban development spread far beyond the historical core. But like many large infrastructure projects, the bridge solved one problem while creating new ones. Traffic increased, car dependency grew, and urban sprawl accelerated. This happens surprisingly often in transportation planning. You build a road to reduce congestion, and somehow the road immediately fills with cars. It's almost as if traffic behaves like gas. It expands to fill all available space. The Tagus shaped Lisbon in another important way, by limiting where the city could grow. The river sits beside a landscape of steep hills and valleys. This combination compressed development in dense urban neighborhoods for centuries. And Lisbon's hills are serious. Some streets look less like roads and more like climbing exercises. In Lisbon, even the sidewalks seem slightly out of breath. But this difficult geography also creates an urban advantage. Because space was limited, Lisbon developed a relatively compact city. Many neighborhoods mixed housing, shops, cafes, and services within walking distances. Long before modern planners started talking about 15-minute cities, Lisbon had already many of these characteristics naturally. Dense urban form reduces travel distances and supports public transportation. It also creates vibrant street life. Of course, compact cities work best when residents are not constantly climbing hills, which explains why Lisbon became famous for trams, elevators, and funiculars. This is one of the most interesting things about urban planning. Cities adapt to geography in creative ways. Flat cities build bicycles, steep cities build cable cars, and Venice just gave up and built boats everywhere. The Tagus also affects Lisbon's environment. Large bodies of water help moderate temperatures. The river cools surrounding areas and creates air circulation that influences the city's climate. This matters because Lisbon experiences increasingly intense heat waves during summer. Southern Europe is warming rapidly, and cities are especially vulnerable because of the urban heat island effect. Concrete absorbs heat, asphalt traps heat, cars generate heat, and cities become significantly warmer than surrounding rural areas. But rivers can partially reduce these effects by cooling nearby districts and improving airflow. This is why waterfronts often feel more comfortable during hot weather. Urban planners are increasingly recognizing the natural systems and not decorative extras. They are essential infrastructure. Trees, rivers, parks, and wetlands are now being treated as tools for climate adaptation. Ironically, cities are rediscovering ideas and nature understood long before urban planning existed. But water can also become dangerous. Like many coastal cities, Lisbon faces growing flood risks from sea level rise and extreme rainfall events. Waterfront districts are increasingly vulnerable to storms and flooding, and this creates a difficult question for planning. How do you develop valuable waterfront land without creating future environmental disasters? For much of the 20th century, cities tried to demand nature with concrete infrastructure. Rivers were channelized, coastlines hardened, and wetlands removed. The goal was control. Now many cities are moving toward adaptation instead. Lisbon has increasingly invested in greener waterfront projects, flood management systems, and public spaces that work with natural systems rather than against them. This approach is often called nature-based solutions. Instead of fighting nature, cities use natural systems to solve urban problems. Wetlands absorb floods, trees cool streets, green areas improve air quality, and rivers become partners instead of enemies, which is probably better than waiting for nature to send another strongly worded storm. But perhaps most fascinating effect of the Tagus was psychological. Water changes how cities feel, and wide horizon, reflected sunlight, open skies, ferries, and waterfront promenades create a sense of openness that shaped everyday life. Many European cities feel enclosed. Lisbon feels expansive. The river is constantly visible. It appears between buildings, beneath bridges, and at the end of narrow streets. Even the city's famous viewpoints exist largely because of the relationship between hills and water. At some point, Lisbon became less of a city and more of a collection of dramatic places to stare at the river. And honestly, that may not be a bad thing. Lisbon teaches an important lesson about urban planning. Geography still matters. For decades, many planners believed technology could fully overcome natural constraints, build more roads, build larger infrastructure, and control environment. But climate change is forcing cities to rethink that approach. Increasingly, successful urban planning means understanding natural systems rather than ignoring them. And Lisbon is a perfect example. The Tagus created trade, it shaped mobility, it influenced density, it moderated climate. And now, it is shaping the city's environmental future once again. Because cities are never separate from nature. No matter how much concrete we pour, rivers, hills, climate, and geography always remains part of the story. And in Lisbon, that story is impossible to miss. Especially when you are climbing uphill after missing the tram, which may secretly be the city's cardiovascular health strategy.